what happened in 2015, the Greek government took measures to prevent the violation of the Greek borders by refugees and immigrants. As this situation continued, the corona health crisis became serious in all European countries, including Greece and Turkey, and led the two countries to take different measures to address the pandemic and suppress economic and social activity and to stop fully road, rail, and air communication between them. The paper will examine whether these two crises, the refugee and the health crisis, have engaged the media in both countries, if they got the same degree of attention or the coverage was more intense for one of the two, if they held the same or similar position in the daily agenda of the media of the two countries, a supportive attitude toward the actions of each government according to the rally round flag theory, or if some media proved to be critical of their governments. Whether Peirce-Robinson policy media interaction model applies in the case of both countries or not. And finally, if each country's news has a dominant position for the other country. One may ask why it is so important to watch the media of the two countries on the main issues on which these two countries are almost in the constant conflict. First of all, it should be noted that in January 1996, there was a crisis that brought the two countries to the brink of war and which was averted by the US diplomatic intervention. The subject of this crisis was again the status of islands, islets, or rocky islets in the Aegean Sea. The Eyiui crisis was an episode in which the media of the two countries not only played an important role with the support of governmental actions, but also contributed decisively to the beginning of the crisis, Turkey, and the escalation of the emergency, Greece. Of course, they could not take these actions without the political will of each state to confront the other state. This phenomenon is not unique, as we have many reports that the media, instead of just covering controversies and conflicts in the news, create a climate of tensions and form a hostile opinion. The ability to offer news from around the world on a 24-hour basis, the CNN effect, contributed significantly to this from 1990s. To examine the journalistic coverage of the two crises, specific media outlets with a long presence in each country were selected. Our purpose was to receive the information from traditional media with a strict organization structure to the administration and to production of news, with gatekeepers, pundits of information, which they define the main issues, degrade or eliminate other issues as insignificant, thus indirectly enhancing the visibility of the main issues, the phenomenon of amplification. To answer these questions, three media outlets from Greece and Turkey were selected. From Greece, the newspaper Kathimerini, liberal pro-government newspaper, Efemerida Syndekton, a left anti-government Syriza-oriented newspaper, and the newspaper Protothema, pro-government populist newspaper were selected. From Turkey, the Anadolu Ajansi, the state news agency, Hurriyet newspaper, a pro-government newspaper after its sale to the Demirören Group in 2018, and Ahval, an independent internet site, according to its own, friendly to the Gülen movement, according to the Turkish authorities. Our writing team watched the news on the two topics in Greek and in Turkish language, and not the news feed in English for the period of February 26 to April 29, 2020. Both the refugee and immigration crisis on the Greek-Turkish border and the effects of the health crisis in the news in the neighboring country concerning the media of both countries to a very significant degree, and that they had to deal with a very important place there in journalism. The refugee and immigration crisis has led to the production of more news articles in the media in question in Greece and in Turkey concerning the health crisis. Both issues concern the media in two countries to the same extent, whether they support the government or not. The two opposition news outlets in Greece and in Turkey, Efimerides Dakton and Akhval, covered to the same extent the totality of the current issues on both topics. Here you can see how many news items per day we have for the refugee migration crisis. With blue line, we have the Greek media, and with red line, the Turkish media. The Turkish media produce the same or even a larger amount of news daily compared to the Greek media. Overall, however, they publish much less news to the two crises than the Greek media. This shows that the Turkish media are not interested in covering the problems on the other side of the Aegean Sea to the same extent as the Greek media are covering what is happening in Turkey. This must be because Turkey as a country and as a society is bigger and deals mainly with its internal affairs more than European countries. In Greece, the issues about Turkey in the Greek media far exceed the corresponding coverage of events in Greece by the Turkish media. A noticeable difference is that in Greece, the media is much more interested in the attitude and actions of the Turkish state, not only in the two issues under consideration, but also in many others, not only bilateral, but also internal Turkish affairs. They believe that Turkey always has the initiative in all bilateral issues and shows obvious or covert aggression, and that Greece is always on the defensive. How is this explained? It is largely due to the fear of the Greeks that the Turkish people are 8 times superior to the Greeks, so they show expansionist tendencies. The difference in the number of texts was uneven between the crisis of Evros River and the health crisis of COVID-19. During the month of March 2020, the Greek media hosted many articles about the conflict on the Greek-Turkish border, criticizing Turkey in a daily basis, as you can see. In the case of COVID-19 health crisis, the media of each country gave significant reporting, but less by comparison to the refugee immigration emergency. Overall, however, the refugee and immigration crisis got more attention from both countries' media. Greek media were very interested in commenting extensively on the cases of the coronavirus in Turkey in comparison to the number of news about cases in Greek by the Turkish media. Perhaps because of the Greek case, severe repressive measures were taken from the early stages, and there were not many cases in terms of the uncontrollable situation in Turkey, according to the Greek media. The Turkish media initially limited themselves to describing the pandemic situation in Greece, perhaps in contrast to the health situation in Turkey. In April, the situation was reversed and the COVID-19 health crisis came to the top of the news and the refugee immigration crisis took a backseat. The COVID-19 pandemic in Turkey concerns the Greek media almost daily, making daily comments and sharply criticizing the measures taken or not taken by Turkey. Here we observe that in Greece, with the strict measures of the government, things are quite calm, and the news in the Turkish media concerning Greece in the pandemic are minimal. In contrast, in Turkey, the situation with the coronavirus in Greece was covered with 3.5 articles in a daily basis, while only in April 3rd, 14th, and 15th, more than 5 texts appeared. Only the text on the pandemic situation in Greece are few. Overall, the text of the pandemic situation in Greece are few, and the texts are more informative and less critical. In April, the refugee crisis disappeared from the columns of the Turkish media, which we are using as examples, and it never published more than 2 articles a day. The session in the Greek media was similar, but the texts in total were doubled. There were days when 6 or 7 texts appeared. By which theory can we interpret the behavior of the Greek and Turkish media during the 2 important events in March and April 2020? Does the CNN effect find application in this case as well? Our opinion is that it is not true, as in the refugee migration crisis, international media and news agencies reported that the movement of refugees was at the instigation of Turkish authorities. It is not the creation of the media for the two countries to take a position on the refugee immigration problem. So the initiative was according to the information of the international media to the Turkish authority, and then the Greek media covered the event with continuous news coverage, taking the official position of its side. There is another reason why the model of Robinson and other researchers for the CNN effect does not apply in the current crisis. In Turkey, the media are under the direct control of the government and Erdogan personally, so they have neither the opportunity to express different views and opinions. There is no other pole of power, as after the coup of 2016, extensive cuts were made in the Turkish armed forces and the Turkish administration. In the case of Greece as well, the media, then the economic crisis of 2010 were bitterly weakened, could not, in the emergency of March-April 2020, set an agenda different to the government's and projected it by exerting pressures to the government and overturning its planning. The government of Kyriakos Mitsotakis emerged after election in July 2019, and in which it achieved a clear victory and has the full support of the parliament. The opposition does not have to propose different positions in the field of foreign policy. Therefore, in Greece, the media could not create problems for the government by adopting a different agenda than governmental. On the contrary, the theory of the interaction between state and media, or even better, the sway of the state indirectly, and even directly on the media, surfaces especially in Southeastern Europe. Igengard and Simon have noted that in countries with strict control of the media, politics greatly influence the presentation of news, even in the private media. The aforementioned is also true in the case of Greece and Turkey. The state-media relationship has deteriorated even more in recent years. Freedom of press has deteriorated in both Turkey and Greece. After the failed coup of 2016, more than 100 journalists were in prison, while Turkey is consistently at a very low position in the Reporters Sans Frontières list. In Greece, journalists are often subjected to police and private violence, and the same deals for foreign journalists. The two states imposed their own will on the media of their country. But is that really the case? Media researchers believe that in both countries, Greece and Turkey, on national issues as ethnic origin, minorities, borders, Cyprus problem, journalists consider that they represent their state and attack the other side. They do not observe and discuss the predicaments from a neutral position. They mostly express Greek and Turkish nationalism and carry out propaganda, seldom consciously. Although true for journalists, it is also true for the media. In cases of war or national crisis, not only the news outlets, but also opposing political forces and the people feel the need to support those who exercise power. It is the rally around the flag theory. But can the refugee immigration crisis and the health crisis of COVID-19 be national issues and unite the people and the media around the current governments? As Bethany Albertson and Sarah Kushner-Gadarian have noted, people in 2015, people react in the same manner to the effects of illegal immigration and pandemics because of feelings of anxiety, fear, and insecurity that appear when the public health is in jeopardy. The public turns mainly to the state-provided health institution and support the government. Therefore, the media in Greece and Turkey during the two crises were completely on the side of their governments, even those that do not belong to the pro-government media. In contrast to the EMEA Kardak crisis, they do not belong, the media did not contribute to this crisis, nor did they pressure their government to push a policy. Instead, governments took actions in the refugee immigration crisis, and media supported the action of governments. They may not have been pressured by governments to advance policy, but they consider it their duty to cooperate with their governments because they knew that they had to do the right thing to be on the right side. A different attitude could have had negative consequences for the media. But even if the owners and journalists in the Greek and Turkish media did not feel the pressure of the state, they would probably follow the same policy, because traditionally, on national affairs, journalists support the position of the nation they belong to, because they assume that they express the public opinion. Nowadays, societies consider the issues of the pandemic and illegal immigration as significant issues as those of foreign policy. It's precisely the issues of the two consecutive crises, the reasons that media of the two countries behaved as if they were national issues and as if they were going to war. Each one supported their nation and tried considerably to influence the public opinion in their country. Thank you.
Thank you. Just I was going to just give you for a head that you have completed all your time, but you have finished it. Thank you very much.
I've told you that it's 15 or something like
16 minutes.
1 minute
Okay.
more.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. I hope, I think that you might have lots of questions, but I think we should, if it is better for us to wait until the end of the panel, that we have 3 more presenters, and next one is gonna be the llkim Ozdikmenli Celikoglu, and her title is Hagia Sophia case, a matter of domestic or foreign policy. Could you please take the floor? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everybody, hello. So to begin with, by the way, I don't have slides to share. To begin with, my research is based on an assumption. Justice and Development Party, the government party in Turkey, seems to adopt the idea that an assertive foreign policy, especially at a time it has tensions with the West at multiple fronts, requires strong domestic power on the one hand, and on the other hand, consolidation of domestic power owes much to an assertive foreign policy, especially at a time of economic crisis. So in this research, I particularly try to reveal the entanglement, the intertwinement of domestic and foreign political dimensions in the recent conversion of Hagia Sophia Museum in Istanbul, Turkey, into a mosque, through an analysis of the coverage of the topic in pro-government media. Let me first make a brief introduction about the building and the recent developments, especially for those who are unfamiliar with the Turkish case. The Church of Hagia Sophia, the Holy Wisdom in Greek, was built in 537 in Constantinople, the then capital of Eastern Roman Empire. It had been the imperial church and the seat of the patriarch, thus the principal church of Orthodox Christianity for almost 9 centuries. When the city was conquered by the Ottoman Empire in 1453, Hagia Sophia was immediately transformed into a mosque on the orders of the conqueror himself, Mehmed II, as a symbol of victory of Islamic civilization. After service to Islam for almost 5 centuries, a secular future was designated for the building by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the leader of the young secular Turkish Republic. Between 1934 and 2002, it has been a museum representing the long and multi-layered history of Constantinople/Istanbul, capital of 2 historic empires. Hagia Sophia was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in the 1980s and has drawn millions of visitors every year. For both Christian and Islamic fundamentalists, the building represents a religious civilizational symbol. Islamist groups and certain conservatives in Turkey have also kept alive the expectation that one day it would once again become a mosque. In the last decade, calls to reconsecrate the site, that is to turn the museum into mosque, started to be made by some Islamist activists. There were petition campaigns, demonstrations in front of the museum, etc. And in 2015, for the first time, Quran was recited in Hagia Sophia in the opening of an exhibition. And then in 2016, an imam was officially appointed to the pavilion outside Hagia Sophia, which is already open to prayer. And as part of this house of prayer, Ezan, the 5 times daily call to prayer, was read and transmitted through the speakers of Hagia Sophia's minarets. However, Erdogan's governments initially refrained from going any further than that. Erdogan himself did not publicly back the calls for conversion until 2019. In a rally in Tekirdağ in mid-March, he actually scolded those who shouted "Open Hagia Sophia" as a mosque, telling them to crowd the Sultan Ahmet Mosque next to it first and then make such demands. And he said that it's a setup, such demands were set up by some dishonorable people, probably implying the Gülenists in Turkey who attempted a coup in 2015-16. However, in just a few weeks after that, just before the local elections, he told in an election rally that they were planning to change Hagia Sophia from museum to mosque after the elections. And when we come to today, 1 year later, in July 10, 2020, Turkey's High Council cancelled the 86-year-old cabinet decree that had changed the status of Hagia Sophia from mosque to museum. And High Council, by the way, had previously turned down a similar application on the grounds that it would be an interference into the executive's realm. Well, immediately after the legal decision by the court, a presidential decree was issued, and the first Friday prayer on July 24th hosted 350,000 people, according to official figures. The decision triggered deep political and ideological fault lines in Turkey and led to international responses as well. So at first glance, it seems like a pure domestic policy issue. The government either responding to public opinion or manipulating public opinion, depending on one's political position. However, some observers argue that this was a politically calculated decision to support the aim to play a leading role in the Middle East or in the Muslim world in general. It was, according to Jamaluddin, for example, it was expected to forge a populist unity in the fragmented Islamic world. So that Erdogan said that the resurrection of Hagia Sophia was the harbinger of the liberation of Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem and the footsteps of Muslims' will to leave hard days behind. And that gesture coincided with a period of revived foreign policy activism in Syria, Libya, and finally with the Turkish-Greek tension in the Aegean Sea. These two together led many commentators, including proponents and opponents of Erdogan, interpret this act as a symbol of Turkey's brave, assertive, or neo-Ottomanist, again, it depends on your political position, foreign policy. It was not simply a reversal of a former domestic decision. It had important foreign policy dimensions. So the aim of this study is to understand the proponent's perspective, the meaning they attach to this decision, and to this aim, news and commentaries in 3 newspapers that are supportive of government policies in different degrees, Yeni Şafak, Türkiye, and Sabah, between July the 1st and September 15th were analyzed. Well, I have to say that I haven't finished analyzing the commentaries in Sabah yet, but I think my research so far allows me to reach certain conclusions. So I grouped my findings in 6 topics, each of which reflects how domestic policy and foreign policy dimensions are entangled. First of all, by the way, from now on, most of the things I will say are in quotation marks, of course, they are not my opinions. So the first title, the first let's say, group of findings is about the depiction of the decision by the media. So we can see here how foreign policy aims dimension is dominant in simply defining the case, in simply labeling the case. To list a few, it's the correction of a historical mistake. It's a symbol and proclamation of fully independent and nationalist Turkey. It's the beginning of the revival of the soul of Ottoman state, which is the last and most sophisticated representative of Islamic civilization. It is exit from a period of interregnum. It's the realization of the ideal of red apple. This is a reference to the symbolic repertoire of the Nationalist Action Party, which is the nationalist ally of Justice and Development Party. It's the strike to the continuing Western dream of revival of Byzantium. It's the triumph of crescent over the cross, or Islam over Christianity. And finally, it's a torch in Turkey's march towards the vision of a global state, a symbol of Turkey's leadership in the Muslim unity and revival. The second group of findings concerns the causes of decision to turn Hagia Sophia into museum, the decision taken in 1930s. So here in the newspapers, in the commentaries, two simultaneous and intertwined factors are mentioned. Secularist mentality in the early Republican era and the lack of sovereignty, again in the early Republican era. So according to the conservative historical narrative in general, Turkey was geographically contracted, politically suppressed, and culturally colonized in the early Republican period. So there are various appearances of this narrative in the newspapers I examined. According to one columnist, it was that decision to turn it into a museum. It was an announcement of giving up the vision of global domination and all imperial pursuits. It was an application of rigid secularism, a symbol of denial of any continuity between Ottoman state and republic. Here we see domestic and foreign dimensions together. However, many columnists prefer to highlight foreign pressure rather than domestic will. The decision was not the result of domestic will, but a plot, a fait accompli of imperialist crusaders and Mason lords. One columnist claims that, or turning Hagia Sophia into museum is the result of a hidden foreign pressure, which is embodied in the so-called secret protocols of Lausanne Treaty. Here, again, for the audience unfamiliar with the Turkish history, I open a parenthesis about Lausanne. This is also important as a symbol because the selection of 24th July for the opening of Hagia Sophia reflects a symbolism. It's the anniversary of Lausanne Treaty, which finalized the First World War for the new Republican Turkey. This treaty is a victory that corrected the earlier Sev Treaty for the Kemalists. So there's one opinion about Lausanne regarding it as a triumph. While for the Islamists, it's the abandonment of Ottoman lands. So it's not a victory, on the contrary, actually. And the Friday prayer in that exact date is marked as the beginning of revival, a reversal of Lausanne Treaty in a sense. Yet, finally in this part, I should say that regarding Atatürk's role, most columnists are quite cautious. They seem to care about not to look like they are happy with reversing a decision made by Atatürk himself. So Atatürk continues to be some sort of a common figure. They claimed that the cabinet, or they supported the claim that the cabinet decree was legally dubious for many signatures, including that of Atatürk, was forged.
I'm so sorry to intervene to because it was going to smoothly, but could you please come to the conclusion? Thank you.
Oh, it's already
It's already not ended, but a couple of minutes, and it seems that you are just in the middle of your argument, and I want to remind you that you have just a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me continue with the causes of recent decision, according to these newspapers. There are 3 things to mention: Turkey's changing outlook about religion and about its past, Turkey's changing international position, and Erdogan as a leader is another important factor. So it's claimed that under Justice and Development Party, Turkey is no longer dependent. It provided many states with health equipment during the pandemics. It makes its own ships, planes, and drones, etc. So Turkey stopped admiring and emulating colonizers' culture, does no longer have an inferiority complex. Turkey becomes a game setter in Eastern Mediterranean, Libya, Syria, Somalia, etc. And according to one columnist, we now have the power and courage to say, threats will get you nowhere, bring it on if you dare. So opening Hagia Sophia to prayer is announcement of that position. In other words, Turkey is now powerful enough to repeal the secret articles of Lausanne Treaty. And for Erdogan's role, he is represented as a longtime supporter of reconsecration, and realization of this promise confirms that he is the last string of the chain of great leaders. And also he is praised by many columnists for wisely waiting for a legal decision, which secures that a later government cannot take the decision back with another decree. So another group of findings is about foreign policy aims and representation of foreign reactions. Here, the reconsecration is explained in 2 frameworks: Turkey's response to Western assaults on its sovereignty and Western assaults on the Muslim world, and Turkey's leadership in the Muslim world. So here, there are many, let's say, the definitions of a project, a Western project, regarding the role of Islamic countries. And the idea mostly repeated is that there is the clash of civilization thesis invented 30 years ago by the West, and Islam was designated as the new enemy. And Turkey was capable of spoiling this game by mobilizing Muslim societies thanks to its cultural and historical bonds. And they talk about, most columnists talk about how the coup attempt in July 15, 2016 was the peak of this war against Islam and war against Turkey as the potential to reverse that war. So Turkey stopped, Turkey stopped the destruction projects, creating lines of defense outside its borders. And Hagia Sophia is a symbol of this rise. So let me get to the replies. Yeah, okay, I will finish in a couple of minutes, in 2 minutes. Is it fine?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
so there are replies to the opposition parties, how they got the case of resecration. So again here, in locating the opposition's position, we see how foreign policy is a major criterion. The opposition parties are criticized for having an embedded relationship with the West. The secularist RPP is regarded as, like, for example, Hellenophiles. The Istanbul Metropolitan Mayor is called as a Hellenophile. They are Byzantines inside us, idolatrous followers of the West, and so on. And opposition parties recently established by former JDP leaders are also criticized for being part of this Western plots. And finally, this is the least important actually, there are replies to the critiques inside the neighborhood. That means the conservative circles. Some columnists reminds those who ask why Erdogan waited for so long. that it would probably result in a coup if it were done earlier. So you have to wait for everything to happen in the right time and so on. So let me finish at that point. If there are any questions, I will continue in the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was quite interesting subject because still we have the influence of the opening of Hagia Sophia case in Turkey and in the region as well. So I am sure that we are going to have lots of questions about it as well. I think I have at least two, so I have to wait for the end of the presenters. So if you don't mind, I would like to just move to the next presenter, and it's gonna be llkim.
Yes.
Sorry for mispronunciation, and his title is Between Marginalized and Abandoned: Exploration of Digital Refugees in China. Okay, I would
Sure.
like to give the floor to you, and please.
Is it okay? Can you see my slide now?
It's loading. Yes, we can all see, I think.
Okay, now. Okay, thank you so much. First of all, thanks for organizing this amazing conference. And I'm such stressful as a baby student because, well, I will do my self-introduction. I'm llkim. I'm the second year postgraduate student in Digital Media and Society program at Uppsala University, Sweden. And this is my, the title for tonight, for today is Between Marginalized and Abandoned: Exploration of Digital Refugees in China. And the first part, I will have some slightly brief introduction, and it will be explain why I will do this kind of study. So this is the context of China, because this study is originally from the pandemic, because as we know, China is the first country to lock down to keep the spread of the coronavirus across the nation. And they have a slightly better condition from March. So I define that China now is in a post-pandemic period. And then the lockdown policy has been canceled step by step. So then but for the public service, there's a health code system has been created, which is you use an app called Alipay, and then on your phone, you can indicate your individual health status. They have different colors, QR code to show your individual health. But this is compulsory, and you must use this to access any place, the public traffic, supermarket, any kind of place, you must use this. And then there's also some key data from Chinese government in 2020. And the first one is there are over 254 million elderly people in China now. And there are 897 million mobile internet users in China. And the last one, which is more important, there are almost 6 million people in China. They earn the monthly salary around 150 euro. So it means still a lot of people suffering with poverty. So this is the reason why I want to explore the elderly people, how to deal with the technology like the health code system during the pandemic. So this is my research questions. The first one is, what are the main challenges for elderly Chinese people in post-pandemic China? And second one, what does the performance of Chinese social class structures in the challenges look like? So from my theoretical framework, actually, I combined it from two parts. The first part is from capital perspective, which is economic capital and the digital capital, because they are intertwined together to deal with the technology. And the second part, which is from the digital divide to digital inequality. I prefer to use the digital inequality because it can show the differences, the digital capital due to the social structure. So this kind of phenomenon can be considered in a structure perspective. And the method and data, I use a critical discourse analysis to observe the media representation. And it's including 4 media reports, including 2 videos from 3 media agencies. And for these 3 media agencies, it's including 1 official government media, 1 local media, and 1 internet media. Second part, I will try to claim some of my findings from discourse and the reality. So the first, for the findings from the discourse, this can be a procedure to conclude from this report. It always happens that the elderly people want to go outside, have some activities, and then they have some household issues. After they will be rejected by the staff, like they can't access the public traffic. The bus driver will reject them, and they can't to the supermarket or back to their home because the security will reject them since they can't show the house code. They can't prove themselves is very healthy. So they always have a conflict happened. But ironically, at the end, the staff always be punished by the official. So it's quite ironically. But what's the real challenges for them? I try to summarize 2 parts, which is the 2 categories. For these elderly people, for some of them can't afford they can't afford the mobile phone. So they don't have mobile phone to show the health code. And for the other part, which is a low quality device, they only have the mobile phone, can use some basic function like the phone call and the message. So these 2 categories both have this context household issues, and then there's the result that is they have right to the public, but they can't access to the public. So the final part of this is my conclusion and some future studies and limitations. And for the conclusion, first one, I consider this is institutionalized abandon because the household system itself is ignoring this large community. There are over 200 million elderly people in China. Although the staff has been punished at the end, but they still show this institution is trying to ignore them. And secondly, which is a technology perspective, I can say the technology intensifies the marginalized because it's not offered the convenient experience for these elderly people. Although the household system is want to be convenient for everyone, so they can access to the public. So ironically, the technology is trying to extend the marginalized boundary to divide the elderly people with other normal people. And the last part I conclude that is the digital refugee phenomenon in China, because it shows the digital refugee is rarely exists in China and it becomes a social factor in China. This is not only a poverty issue, technology issue, it's more a social structural issue. And because it's not only happened for the elderly people, but also for the students, they can't access to the online education during the pandemic. So this is not only in the pandemic, but also the daily practice. And this is the reason why I didn't claim the during the pandemic in my title. I consider this is a social reproduction. And for my limitation and future studies, while this is the material collection issue, it should be broader because I just based for the 4 media reports. And I don't know, is this a generalized result or just a Chinese uniqueness phenomenon? So I prefer to observe more in the future, like in Nordic area, since Nordic shares the relatively high degree of mediatization society. So how do they have the same digital refugee phenomenon issues? And is there anything new in these areas? So this is my presentation for today. Thanks so much. You are on mute. Hello?
Hello. Okay.
Oh, yeah, unmute.
Thank you very much, Leo. It was really interesting and I really enjoyed it. I have a couple of questions for you too, but we need to wait for one more presenters. She is, if I'm not wrong, Assem, or he is Assem.
Yes, good afternoon.
Fertile is a social media as a platform for political mobilization in authoritarian regimes, the case of study of Kazakhstan. And thank you very much. Could you please start your presentation?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a PhD student at the Faculty of Law and Political Sciences at the University of Szeged in Hungary. I think my presentation should be seen by everyone. Yes.
Yeah, I think we can see. Thank you.
Okay. Last year turned out to be the most tumultuous in Kazakhstan in terms of social protest and civic activity, but it is definitely not the end to the story. My study focuses on the role of social media in the rise of protest movements and political mobilization in Kazakhstan. Since 2015, the number of civil activists and political bloggers on YouTube and Facebook considerably increased. The main purpose of all political bloggers and activists is transition towards democracy and solid political freedoms, reduction of corruption rates. I argue that the social movement, Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan, which operates only within the realm of social media platforms, promoted political activism and civil protest in the country. In non-democratic regimes, social media became the only available tool for mobilization. First, I will discuss the online political sphere in Kazakhstan. Second, I will demonstrate the results of the analysis of YouTube and Facebook pages of the social movement Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan. Using SMM software, I analyzed the most viewed contents of top 8 YouTube political bloggers. Also, I did automated text analysis on the Facebook posts of the movement leader in years 2017 and 2019. And my objective was to confirm or reject the hypothesis of the extremist nature of the social media-based movement, the Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan, which was admitted as extremist by a Kazakhstani court in March 2018. In 2019, a Freedom House country report concluded that Kazakhstan is not free. In May 2019, the study of Pew Research described the country as autocracy. In a nutshell, the country is characterized by strong neo-patrimonialism, high corruption rates, pronounced personality cult, and dynasticism, meaning invention of new titles for the ruler, weak links between the government and civil society, the absence of secure property rights, arbitrariness in the judiciary system, exile opposition, severe restrictions to freedom of speech and freedom of association. So, in the conditions of absence of political pluralism and civil society, social media have become the heart of grassroots advocacy and alternative political views. Most popular social media platforms in the country are vk.com, Pinterest, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Political bloggers and civil activists are present on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Usually, Instagram and Twitter accounts repeat of what is on Facebook. Russian-based social network VK blocks any unwanted activity of civil activists. That is why no actual political bloggers are present there. And Pinterest does not suit well for this kind of activity. So YouTube and Facebook provide most comprehensive data for analysis. Top political, in my study using SMM software, I found 8 most viewed and most popular political YouTube blogs. It is worth noting that 4 out of these 8 authors reside outside of the country, in France and Ukraine. My interest was driven by the fact that social media-based movement, Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan, since its foundation in April 2017, became the only social movement which regularly organizes protest rallies and other forms of collective actions. In 2 years, the movement mobilized people all around the country more than 30 times. Its official channel, 1612, along with another political blog, Basse, are top 2 political news channels on YouTube. Its leader's YouTube blog is the 3rd most viewed one. In March 2018, the government declared the Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan movement extremist. It operates through YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and the members of DCK use Telegram to communicate. The emergence of social movement DCK at the level of virtual protest first has changed the political socialization and mobilization processes quite dramatically. Protests and uprisings of more than 1,000 participants have been a rare phenomenon in the previous 28 years of independence of the country. Basically, the only mass protest counting to several thousand participants took place in 2016, when people protested against the land reform which allowed foreign citizens to take land for a long-term lease. The nature of protest actions has changed. In the last 2 years, the number of strikes and their attention decreased significantly. Previously, strikes in oil and mining industry have been the most tense and problematic issue in the social sphere. But in the last 2 years, general social unrest increased, particularly in 2019. Since the start of the activity of the democratic choice, number of protests of more than 100 participants increased considerably. In addition, these rallies take place in at least 4 big cities, which happened only once in the previous 28 years of independence. It should be highlighted that protests and the uprisings at all levels take place in spite of tightening control over freedom of expression and freedom of association. More and more activists are detained, arrested, and fined. Social media and the internet started to experience blockages and massive shutdowns in 2018 and 2019. Most importantly, this grassroots activity, civil activity, beats the popularity of the pro-presidential party and the president's office. Although the president's office and the pro-presidential party are present on social media since 2012, while all the political channels have become active since 2015. YouTube and Instagram accounts can be compared in terms of the number of subscribers. Democratic Choice Movement is an absolute champion on YouTube in comparison with the pro-presidential party and the president's office. The leader has 125 times more subscribers on YouTube than the pro-presidential party, and 63 times more subscribers than the president's office. On Instagram, the Democratic Choice leader has more subscribers than the party and less than the president's official page. So no doubt that the movement is of high interest to the general public, considering the threat of official persecution for being subscribed to their pages and liking their posts. The number of people interested could be much more. The next graph shows the Democratic Choice Movement's blogs views count, beat the president's office and the state-supported political party in the country. One more top political blog, Basse, also stemmed from the DCK, is even more popular among the YouTube audience. The analysis of the content of 8 YouTube blogs showed that in the last 5 years, the posts that caused most interest among the audience were dedicated to the following topics: the first president, Nazarbayev and his family, protests and civil activists, the detention of Kazakh poet for participating in protests, and finally, Chinese expansion in Kazakhstan. The first president, Nazarbayev personality, focused for his future presidential tenure, and his family members in the highest state positions constituted an absolute majority of the most viewed videos of political bloggers. Extremist nature of the social movement was defined based on the Facebook post of the leader of the movement. It was admitted like that by the court. Textual analysis of the Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan leader's Facebook posts demonstrate main points of his program. Here graph shows the most frequent terms in 2 years period of the leader's Facebook page. So his page is mainly about the first president Nazarbayev, authoritarian regime change, that they will protest, will change the regime, increasing number of supporters, also power, government, political and human rights. Non-violent nature of the protest organized by the movement is supported by the argument that protest comes only with adjectives peaceful, light, in terms of no arms and mass. Basically, rallies organized by the movement can be defined as non-violent resistance campaigns. So, while the internet, YouTube, Facebook are not censored in general, some activists and bloggers are targeted and jailed, as it happens in informational autocracies. Most popular political bloggers are located outside of Kazakhstan. Indeed, social media has leveled the playing field of information gap between the ruling elites and the rest of the population. The main message of the movement leader is that standard political participation intrinsic to democratic nations is not viable in the current political regime because of rigged elections and widespread corruption. That is why the leader of the democratic choice concludes that non-violent protests of several thousand participants shall allow to change the current political regime and transit to democracy. Thank you very much for your attention. I think.
Thank you very much, Assem, yeah, right?
Yes.
And we have finished all the 4 presentations. We have an hour for the question and answer session. Thank you very much again. I don't want to spend too much time to just talking, and I just want to jump to the questions. If you have questions, please raise your hand on the direct right to me. And I'm waiting for reactions here. No. And I can unmute you if you raise your hand and ask a questions. Okay, I don't see any questions we have. Actually, we have one. Okay. Bilge Filiz, could you please keep your questions short and precise? Thank you.
Yes, I have a question to llkim. You talked about the digital refugees, so I think that it contains the Chinese elderly and also young people. But how do these people react against all these policies? I really wonder how they react. I mean, they were locked and they couldn't reach any public services, and they're locked there and they cannot reach any public services, and how they react. Or is there any reaction at all? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. It's a good question. Normally, for my study this time, for the elderly people, they are mostly it just have the conflict with the staff. That's all. Since they also can't have the use the social media to try to seek some support. But I also did another studies before about the poor students. They can't access the online education, and then for these students, they are try to use some official government service, like since they can't access to the online like Zoom, so they went to the government office to use their internet network to access the online service. So it depends. So this is what I would love to say. But normally they do not have any like the social movement like that kind of stuff. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. If there's no question, I would like to ask another question, llkim, because it's related to previous questions. Your focus on the elderly people, and I think Bilge Filiz mentioned that you covered the young people as well. Is it true, or just for all elderly people?
For this presentation, I did is only focused on the elderly people, but I have some experience about the young people before. Yeah.
Okay, it's because that they are old people and they don't know how to use digital technologies and the smartphones. That's why they don't have the phone, or they are just can't afford the phones.
They have two. This is the why I discussed this is two categories. One category is they can't afford. This is also the one is the figure that I show in my title page. And this kind of people, they can't have this kind of elder people, they can't afford the phone, so they also can't access to the household. And for the other kind of people, they have they have this kind of ability, but their phone is not functional. They can't access to that app. So that's the problem. This is two kinds of the problem.
Okay, so elderly people who can't afford the phone or have just low or old-fashioned phone.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so it doesn't include the young people who can't afford phone.
Oh no, this is not this study
Okay.
is including the young people.
Okay, that's interesting, because we are now we don't have an exact date when the pandemic time is gonna finish. So I think we have gonna heard so much news about that one in all over the world. And thank you very much for such an interesting presentation. And I think we have one more questions. Rashid, am I right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I have a question for Assem regarding the possibilities that something might happen in Kazakhstan in the observable future that is similar to what is happening in Belarus right now. I'm going to be presenting in the next panel in M05 on the protests in Belarus, and those have largely been organized sort of spontaneously on social media. And so what are the chances that social media in Kazakhstan will be opposition, but eventually to organize a protest at a scale that might actually threaten the existence of the current regime?
Thank you for your question. Yes, I think that there is quite high chance that there will be massive protests in the next, I think, 2 years. Because the tension, social unrest and social tension has reached to a very high level, and economic factors also, and pandemic, because economic factors because of pandemic added to this social unrest. So the authorities are trying to keep everything closed and under quarantine in order not to let the organization of the protest rallies. Even the closest one should take place on September 25th, but again, maybe to prevent this, the authorities are starting to say that the number of COVID cases increased. That's why we're again possibly will close all the social places and buildings. So there are very high chances, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let me add another question, Assem, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
You have focused on the protest movements, actually, opposing groups, isn't it? They don't support the government. So nowadays we have, it doesn't matter if it is liberal or authoritarian regime, that all the governments have their own social media groups or facilitators or accounts, some fake accounts that support their stance. So how the government responds in social media level to these opposing groups in Kazakhstan? Do they have any unofficial but pro-government YouTube channels just refusing all the arguments the opposing groups published in their channels?
Yes, actually there is a special expenses article in the budget which says promoting authorities prestige on social media, and there are millions are going to those expenses. So, and there are even people who are called Nurbots, meaning that the pro-presidential party first name Nurotan, so they're Nurbots who are posting fake comments, who are criticizing opposition bloggers, political bloggers. So the government is very active in this sense. And
which ones the watch rate is higher? Opposing groups watching rates or pro-governments?
Yes, for now the opposing groups, those who are in opposition, they are mostly in exile opposition. They have higher ratings and they higher views count than all the rest, because oppositional bloggers, they try to reveal the true nature of those Nurbots who are trying to criticize the opposite side. So there is a constant war between the sides, but still people.
Social media war.
Yes, on social media wars. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other audiences who want to ask questions, or I'm gonna move? Okay, let me ask several questions, and starting with Vlasidis, if you don't mind. Thank you for the presentation. First of all, the one sentence you mentioned that I really, it comes to me really interesting, that in media in Greece and in Turkey, they are under control of the governments. If I'm not wrong, that's the quotation you said that one. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So why do you take the opposing groups or the different views of media organizations and to come to that position? You take the opposing groups, media organizations, for example, Ahval, you said, and the pro-government, and on the other hand, leftist and rightist and populist organizations, media organizations in Greece, and you still come to conclusion that both media organizations in Turkey and Greece, they are under control of governments. So what is the point of your research then? It is just to prove that they are under the control of government, so they are exaggerated all the issues between Greece and Turkey, including migration and the COVID-19 issues, or they are just taking orders from the governments to exaggerate all the issues between Greece and Turkey. Let me unmute you, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is no objection that in Turkey and in Greece, the media are under direct or indirect control. The political elite and the administration are influence strongly the traditional media in both countries. That's why several international organizations such as the European Federation of Journalists, the International Press Institute, and most of all Reporters Sans Frontières, they have objections about the operation of media and media freedom in both countries. Let's say 2013, Greece dropped 30 seats because the then government of Samaras closed down, shut down the Greek public television. It was a direct intervention. There is no objection about this, that they are under direct or indirect control. But except this, for these specific cases, such as the refugee and migration issue and the pandemic, from 2015, we have theories that both these issues are called national issues for modern societies. So journalists and media taken part, and they consider themselves as the representatives of their societies and their states. But even the state was not, these media were not suspended or not influenced by the state, they will have the same thesis, that they support the national task of both countries. This is our thesis.
Okay, so if you don't mind, if it is too recent, but I still want to ask a question about a newspaper whose headline is direct insult to the President Erdogan in Turkey. I think, I don't know if you have heard in Greece and they care about it, but in Turkey there are lots of interactions and reactions to that headline, to that. I don't remember the name of that newspaper,
the
but
name
anyway.
of this newspaper is Demokratia. It is called
How do you evaluate this
it's a
headline?
right-wing, yes, it's a right-wing newspaper. They are pro-government, not liberal, but conservative. There are some tensions in this party, but I strongly condemn these news items, and the same deal for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Information in Greece. Both two ministries from the next day, from the following day, they blame this newspaper and his editor-in-chief, or the owner, I'm not so sure, and they express an issue, a press release that they do not support this news item. And I believe that this is a totally provocation in order to feed the fire of dispute between the two states. This is my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you very much.
This is a provocation.
Yeah, thank you very much. And is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? If you don't have, I am gonna ask my questions. Keep going my questions anyway. No? Okay. İklim Hoca, if you don't mind, I would like to ask a question to you. If I'm not understand you wrong, but in opposing party and the ruling party side, I think they are both, all the newspapers they are supporting in opposing and ruling party, it doesn't matter. They are actually seeing the matter as a foreign issue. Am I right?
No, not actually. If you have something in your mind, you can finish.
No, I have just, because the titles you have read us about how the media reacted the turning the Hagia Sophia into a mosque. And I understand that all the opposing party or the ruling party media, they are just taking the case as a not domestic, but in foreign issues. Maybe they try to separate it from the foreign affairs and keep it as a domestic matter for the legitimation issue, but still, they are always have some part of their comment or interpretation that it is a foreign issue, isn't it?
Well, I haven't really scholarly studied the opposition, the newspapers of the opposition, so I particularly limited myself with the proponents of the government. But as far as I followed the news of the opposition, they consider the issue more as a matter of domestic policy, as a way to consolidate the power of, let's say, government. They are regarding this act as some sort of an assault on the, let's say, Republican tradition, an assault on the new legal system of the Republican era, because it's kind of, there were those, let's say, objections in the opposition that it was sort of bringing back Ottoman legal system in the modern Turkish legal system because of the Vakf issue. So you are familiar with the framework, so I'm not explaining for the others, but it's Vakf property and so on. So it's mostly, as far as I followed, the opposition mostly considered it as a domestic policy issue.
What's your point of view then? You have, in the middle of your presentation, you said that these are not my own ideas, and I'm just gonna quote all the titles. How do you see it? Is it a foreign issue or domestic issue? If you don't have to ask that question anyway, but still, I want to hear your opinion.
Mostly a description of what the government thinks, what the government has in mind when taking this decision, and how the pro-government media represented it. So I think that's my finding. Actually, that's the conclusion I arrive. It's there is an entanglement, as I said earlier, and this is something we don't see all the time. There is always, let's say, a room for independent or autonomous foreign policy, because if foreign policy matters are too much integrated in domestic policy, it could be a problem, right? Because you cannot always succeed in foreign policy. You might have your claims, but you might not reach those claims at the end of the day. So it's dangerous. That's why most governments avoid or refrain from entangling domestic and foreign policy issues. But it seems like the Justice and Development Party, because it's self-confident, the government is self-confident for various reasons we can discuss,
Okay.
because of the global situation, because the major powers are too much stuck in their own affairs and so on. So the government feels, let's say, confident, self-confident in that matter. So that's
okay. Thank you.
what I think.
But still, let me add, if all the pro-government media, while they are supporting that it's a domestic issue, actually they are implying it's a foreign issue as well. That's the complication here. They are trying to make it domestic, but by trying to make it domestic, actually they are making it foreign issue. That's an interesting one. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I would like to thank you all the presenters and the audiences here. I have asked my all questions, and if you don't have more questions, then that's gonna be the end of our panel. And I would like to really thank you to all of you, audiences and the presenters. And I hope that we still have actually time, but no questions, then it means the end. Thank you again, and see you in the next panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can keep here. You can stay here and don't close your Zoom program until the next panel starts, or you can just sign out and re-sign in again when the next panel starts. Thank you very much.
Thank you.